I would really like to thank Jason Vincent for agreeing to be with us today and talk to us a little bit about business plans, keeping them current, because it's probably one of the most important parts of getting your business going and keeping it going. So Jason Vincent from Norwich Community Development Corporation, thanks so much. I'm turning it over to you.
Thanks, Mary. Before we split anything off, I just want to check in with the two members that are joining us today on the call. Ivana, could you tell me a little bit about yourself? Because I would like to customize my presentation to what you're thinking about doing, because there may be some ideas that I can share with you as we're talking about this. So Ivana, what are you thinking about?
Hello?
Hi.
Thank you. So I'm opening a nonprofit organization. That's something that I'm working on right now.
Nonprofit? Yeah. So what are you, what's the mission?
A connection and personal development.
Okay. Great. And then Jay Ward, I'm sorry, I don't know your first name, but Jay, if you, what are you thinking about doing? Okay, great. My name is Jason Vincent. I'm the president here at Norwich Community Development Corporation. We are a nonprofit that works in the city of Norwich, for the city of Norwich mostly. That's our biggest customer, them and Norwich Public Utilities. But we work with the business community to enable investment within the city. We work on all types of projects, whether it's running a co-work center that we do here, or whether it's helping people figure out a pro forma to build a building, or to run, or P&Ls and cash flows to run their business as part of their business plan. I work to connect people with all different types of business professionals, whatever you need. And what I tell everybody is, I'm here to help, but I can't help if we're not talking. So if there's anything we can do to help you, you're part of my network now. You know who I am. I'm most responsive to text messages and emails just because of the volume of work we're doing, but we're here to help. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a presentation on instead of building my own, I basically took the FDIC's building a business plan guide, and I'm just going to walk you through elements of the business planning process, and then talk a little bit about some of the things that I did. Not only am I president of Norwich Community Development Corporation, I own I'm a shareholder, is a proper language, for a business called Epicure Brewing, which is a 15-barrel brew house conveniently located next door to where NCDC is located, and right in downtown Norwich. So that business launched in June of 2017, and you know, we're still making a go at it during the COVIDs, which has been interesting to say the least. And I'll tell you a little bit about how our business plan has had to change to adapt to things that we weren't expecting to happen, right? Let's see if we can get this to work. I'm working on a couple screens. So, you know, I'm using somebody else's PowerPoint because they did a little bit better job trying to tell everybody what they're doing. You know, there's some learning objectives here. I don't need to read that off to you. I'm not going to PowerPoint like that. And then ultimately, the FDIC has a vested interest in trying to teach people about business planning, because their members are banks, and banks need businesses that are prepared. So, you know, a business plan from my perspective is about being prepared. So the key elements about a business plan is you're thinking about investing and opening a business, and would you put your own money in? Okay, that answer may be really easy to answer. It's yourself, right? So, you know, you're betting on yourself and you think you have a great idea. But one of the things I've learned about ideas, any kind of an idea, is the worst way to validate an idea is a self-validation. Like, if you think you have a great idea and you're the only one that thinks you have a great idea, do you really have a great idea? And a business plan is taking an idea and testing it to its nth degree, because in everything that you do, there are things that you know how to do. There are things you don't know how to do. There are things you know how to do, but you don't know it yet. And then there are things you don't know what you don't know. And a business plan is trying to eliminate the unknown unknowns in what your project entails. So if you're looking at renting a space, well, you've got to figure out what the utilities are going to be in that space. That's a known unknown. You may not know what the number is, but you need to figure it out. And there's plugged in numbers that you can use. But if you're looking to go into that space and it's a change of use, and you don't know that there's such a thing called a change of use, and you don't know that could slip you up and trip you up and hold you up for a year, and you sign a lease and you're stuck not occupying that space for a year, you're not going to be in business very long. And surprisingly, that happens to a lot of people as they fall in love with the space. They don't do all their homework, and then they get stuck. So a business plan is what we're trying to do, is prevent people from getting stuck. So it's written because guess what? You've got to be able to give it to people that need time to absorb your idea. If you just tell people your idea, you're already 100 miles an hour ahead of them. You've got to give them a chance to catch up, to be able to get some soak time to think about the idea. A lot of ideas fail, not because it's a bad idea, it's because people didn't have enough time to think about the idea and contemplate what you're saying, because you might be speaking a whole different language to them. I'll give you one example. We have a marina downtown Norwich, and people tell me all the time, boy, that marina, it's not doing well. And I go, what do you mean it's not doing well? How do you know? You look at the books and they're like, oh, no, I can see it. And so I'm like, well, what are you seeing that leads you to believe the marina is doing poorly? And they're like, well, it's only a third occupied. You know, there's a whole bunch of slips that are empty. Well, that marina relies on empty slips because it's a transient related marina, because people come up to go to the casinos, and they make more money on transient slips than they do on seasonals. This is the opposite of a marina that's down in Mystic. Mystic makes more money on seasonals because they can charge a higher rental fee. But in Norwich, where they have to charge a lower rental fee for seasonals because they're so far from the coast, they make a significant amount of money on transients. So most of the slips are empty on purpose. That defies people's logic because they don't know the business strategy, right? So there's a great example of like why you need to put things down and understand, because people are going to make assumptions about what your business is, and they're not going to understand the details that you know. You need to be able to explain to them, like, no, we intend for this business to look like it's not doing well from other people's perspective, but that is going to do well from our perspective, because that's where our margins are going to be the best. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of different reasons here. And, the business planning methodology is a discipline. That's what it is. Discipline takes time. It takes effort. It takes energy to explore all the different thoughts that you have related to what you're trying to do, and thinking about what milestones are meaningful and impactful, thinking about how processes work, and like what the critical path is. Like, if I need to get a liquor permit for my business, what things do I need to do before I can apply for a liquor permit? There's a whole bunch of things you need to do from a critical path perspective, that if you don't do those other things first, you can never get that permit. Okay, so the business plan helps you think through, like, all right, so this morning I was on a call with a business that's looking to open up in Kilney. It's a brewery. And I got connected to them because one of my former associates works for that town, knows that I run a brewery. And so I went through their milestone process to talk about, what the critical path was. And, we was able to share with them some of the things like, okay, you got this out of order because you can't get to this step without that other step. And they had a couple steps that were totally missing from their list, because you don't know what you don't know, right? So by creating this list, they were able to share it with me, and I was able to react to it and give them my advice based on my experience and where I learned my mistakes. And that's another reason a business plan is great, is you're going to find peers that are in your industry, in your sector, that are willing to help you. They don't see you as competition, because you're not. You're a startup. You may become competition at some point, and that even depends on what you're doing and where you are. But for most instances, most of your peers are not going to be your competition. Your competition is going to be in somewhere else. The business plan will help you understand that. So it's this reality check that I think is a critical piece, is what is it really going to take? And if you don't have the tenacity to create a business plan, are you going to have the tenacity to run your business 6 months in when you're the only one there because you didn't do a good job planning? So I saw an issue recently where a business opened up, and they opened up in a spot that used to be a restaurant. And they thought, okay, we're going to open a restaurant where there used to be a restaurant. No big deal. Well, the restaurant that was there before used equipment that didn't make it a restaurant. It used equipment that it was reheating food. It used certain types of equipment that under building and fire codes didn't have to be considered a restaurant. And so they didn't have to change fire systems. They didn't have to change fire separation between the space and other spaces. So a new restaurant came in, and they thought restaurant equaled restaurant. And guess what? It does not equal restaurant. There are all kinds of restaurants, because equipment makes a big difference, whether people sit inside the place or don't. How dark is it going to be? You know, how many people can sit in the place? There's layers of questions that change the definition of a restaurant. So they're not equal. And on this case, they were using equipment that required special fire separation. And so now the building officials could not give them a permit to occupy the space. And they did a grand opening, and then they did a grand closing the next day. And had to they're scrambling right now to find money. And I think the community's helping them out. But, you know, that's not where you want to be in your business. You don't want to be opened and closed within 24 hours. The statement of intent for third parties, this is a critical piece. Like, you can, like, we'll go back to selling the idea. If you're the only one that thinks this is a good idea, is it really a good idea? And, you know, the ego is one of our most dangerous tools that we have, because it can sucker you into the wrong path quickly. And so if you're the only one that says it's a good idea, your business plan, if you can't get bankers, lenders, other people really excited about what you're doing, you know, those should be indicators that maybe we're not on the right path. So in my business, one of the things that was important to me, I had other investors, shareholders, that I needed to convince that this was a good idea. So the business plan was a communication tool to get them engaged and willing to put their money in. But also, my goal was to go to the first bank I went to talk to and get them to fund the project. And that my business plan was that well prepared that I could do that. And so I worked with groups like the Small Business Development Center, SBDC. They're a free resource. They can provide a little bit of coaching. They have some tools to help demystify how to write a business plan and how to connect it, but also they're good at reviewing these documents and giving you some feedback. And I also work with a group called SCORE. SCORE is a retired professionals group that's in our region. They're all over, but these are people that have worked in industry and business that will review your documents and help coach you and guide you as well. And they're free. You get what you pay for free. I get it. But SCORE, I have found, has been exceptional. The mentor that I had for that project was a guy named David Mitchell, who happened to live in Norwich. And he gave me a lot of good feedback on my plan. And I was able to make adjustments in my assumptions based on what he said. You know, yeah, that assumption seems overly, you know, maybe a little bit too, you're anticipating a little bit too much there. Maybe you want to be a little bit more conservative. And so, you know, I went back and I was able to show him some industry statistics that helped validate my opinion, and we found some middle ground that seemed to make sense in the plan. But by having that document, when I went to the bank said, yeah, we can fund this. And why does that matter? You can't ask for money when you need it. Once you need money, like you're in trouble, like I got a bills to pay and I got no money. You can't ask for that money. You have to ask for money before you need it. And banks can only give you money when you have money. And their ratio is 80-20. Okay. And what I was told years ago by bankers is, don't ask a bank to do something it can't do. And one of the things it can't do is 100% finance. It just can't do that. It's against the law. So your $1 is worth $5 when it's in your pocket. When you take that dollar out of your pocket, chances are it's worth 20 cents. So be very careful about if you need money, because cash is king. Cash flow is going to rule your business. And so nonprofit, for-profit, whatever you're doing, if you don't have cash, you're not doing anything. And once you're out of cash, you can't get more cash. Okay. So then, you know, these are things that the banks are going to be looking for. Most importantly, can you pay them back? That's a pretty straightforward one. Like, how your business plan should model out how much revenue I anticipate, and it should be based on some system. I use the law of big numbers when I'm doing things like this. And what I mean is, whatever industry you're going into, there is a trade organization that has statistics and data regarding that trade. So for breweries, the Brewers Guild is Brewers Association is a national-wide organization. They had nationwide and Connecticut-based data. And I was able to learn that, you know, what the average beer consumption was per capita. And why does that matter? Well, how many people that are a beer consuming age live within the neighborhood? And what ratio of craft beer do they drink versus regular beer? And so then what is the gap within the neighborhood? Like, how much craft beer might be sold here? And what percentage of those sales might I be able to capture? that was all part of my analysis. And I was able to show that I believe that the market gap was X million dollars of craft beer locally produced, and that a certain ratio of Connecticut beer drinkers are craft beer drinkers of Connecticut beer, right? And I had all those statistics in my business plan, and then I was able to use interpolation. It's not a magical word, but I was able to take census data, how many 21 to 55, 65-year-olds live in Norwich or within a 5 to 10 mile drive, depending on competition. And then, what does that equal? If they all came in and bought a beer, what's that number? And if, a more conservative number is what we ended up going with. What we ended up doing as part of my plan is I used a tool called Google Maps. And in Google Maps, you can create your own maps, which is a pretty amazing thing. And I plotted out all my competition that was in them, all the different breweries that were around. I plotted them all out on the map. It takes seconds. You type in brewery, they all pop up, you save it to the map, and then they're all there. And then I found out where the midpoint was between all those breweries. So Epicure to Outer Light and Groton, the midpoint is in Montville, right? And so then I was able to draw a circle around the brewery that I called the brewery shed, like a watershed. Like when water drops on the ground, it only goes downhill. So if it lands on the side of a hill, it's only going one way, right? And that creates a watershed. That I created this brewery shed of where customers, it would be easier for a customer to come to me than to go to somebody else, right? They would have to drive a further distance to go to another place. And that became the audience that I wanted to target and market to. So I used a tool like that to try to define my audience, to understand who lived there, how much beer they might consume. Those are all things that I was able to show to the bank to prove that I could pay them back. It's kind of a long story to talk about that, but.
And Jason, I would say when you're talking about banks too, especially for the nonprofit that is on the call here, to remember that when you're going to a funder for a grant, you're going to have to provide them with the same data. You're going to have to convince them that your project needs that money. So the better the business plan that you've got, especially if you're a new nonprofit, the better.
100%. That's a great point. A grant application is a business plan that you're submitting and asking for money. That's what it is. It uses all the same things, just a little bit different language. But like sources and uses of funds, that's something, if you don't know that language, you should know that, because sources of funds, where is the money coming from to do your project, and the uses, how are you spending the money? That's a critical thing for anything you do, whether it's a business plan or a grant. And I started doing this work. I'm an urban planner by training, so I've worked mostly for municipalities or consulting before I did economic development work. And, I'm in the $20 million worth of grants that I prepared applications for and administered over the years. So, I've got to, doing the grant writing work really prepared me well to write business plans, which, the two business plans I've written are both 3.5 and 4.5 years in operation, respectively. So then this is probably the most important screen right here. These are the things banks are going to be looking for. Is this the right time for you to do what you're doing? Where are you at in terms of the market conditions? When I worked to open the brewery at the time, there were, I think, 15 breweries in Connecticut. Today there are 100, right? So, at the time when we were doing the project, there was a big gap, but now there isn't. So, a bank's going to see that. They're going to know, time out, like, all right, things have changed in Connecticut's beer scene. Like, how are you different? And like, back when we funded Epicure, that was easy because it was a no-brainer because of the market gap. And it wasn't a no-brainer, by the way. They definitely didn't think that, they thought the market was saturated at 15. So now imagine, 85 more breweries in the market, what a bank thinks. Capital, like how much skin in the game? That's another part of the language that you're going to hear frequently is, are you personally putting your own money in? We're talking about banks because there's also the 3 Fs, friends, fools, and family. And you can go to the 3 Fs and, I know my parents, they would give me a couple bucks because they love me, if I went to them. But is that really the right validation of your idea? Somebody that doesn't have the sophistication to validate your idea. Are you overthinking? Are you reacting to validation that's not as strong as it should be? You need good, strong validation of your ideas is one of the things that I talk about. capacity can you repay? With my group, we have 6 shareholders. One of them's an employee of the business. The other 5 have day jobs. And so our ability to repay the loan is very strong because we have 5 different people that have income coming in besides the business. And I'm a shareholder. I don't earn a dollar out of that business right now. It's a long-term investment. Collateral, again, having the multiple people on the shareholder team gave us a bunch of pieces of collateral that we could rely on to help leverage the debt, which is an important thing. Leveraging is a very important word. Take that $1 to $5 is leveraging. You're taking $1 that you have and you're using $4 of other people's money. What we were able to do in the brewery project is I took $1. I found shareholder partners that all put $1 in, right? I turned $1 into, we're effectively 3 households. So $1 became $3. Okay. And then I took the $3 and I went to a bank and got 6 more. So I had 9. And that's how that project came together. I leveraged shareholder interest in my partners, and then we leveraged the bank. Okay. Last is the character, and this is, business plan is your resume. So we included resumes. We wanted people to know that our team had a lot of other experience beyond this industry. And particularly in a brewery environment, everything breaks in any business you're going to do. If you're going to do a farm, you're going to do a nonprofit, guess what you're going to do? You're going to, I wear jeans to work every day because things break around here. And, I'm tired of ruining khakis. So, people are like, oh, why do you wear jeans? It's like, well, we run a co-work center and I get dirty. It's just the nature of this job. So, we're prepared to put it. So I think we hit on these things. The strategic partners are going to have the same needs as a bank or anybody else. So I just use the bank as my standard. And even if you don't want to borrow money, having that level of validation is critical. There's a whole bunch of different types of plans. I'm not going to go into that. What's right for you is going to be what's right for you. Ultimately, if it's your own money and you're doing it your own way, do you need to do all this? You can get away with a lot less. But ultimately, I made my pitch as to why it makes a difference. So, this is a critical part. What are you doing? If you're looking at providing personal coaching or personal services to people as a nonprofit, what other nonprofits are doing that in the neighborhood? And why are you different? What makes you special? That's a business proposition that you have to define. If there are 10 other nonprofits doing exactly what you're proposing to do, all right, well, what makes you unique is that's why would people want to be on your board? Why would people donate to you or give you a grant? Those are what the plans help define, that value proposition. And the value proposition is the critical piece. Timing too. When we were talking about the beer scene, when Connecticut had about 15 or so breweries, we had been traveling up into Vermont where they had probably the highest density of breweries per capita in the state of Connecticut, in the United States. And so we wanted to show people that was part of our business plan. Look what's happening in Vermont. Look what's happening in Colorado, in other places that are just happen to be ahead of the curve. This is what the scene is. And we're able to show that just the timing's right, that, there's going to be a wave of breweries opening in Connecticut. We're on the front end of the wave. It just took us from when we first started the idea, it was 2010. When we opened the business, it was 2017. So it just took a little while to get there. And part of that was just the rigors of this process. Part of it was not understanding how to access capital. So from 2010 to 2014, I didn't understand that $1 could become $5. Nobody ever taught me that. So I didn't know it. And guess what? When you don't know what you don't know, guess what you don't know? Exactly. So when somebody taught me 1 to 5 ratio, and they taught me a second thing they taught me about a tool called a rollover for business startup. And so rollover for business startup is ROBS, is a tax program where you can, right now, if you have a 401k or retirement plan from a former employer, it can't be an active plan. So a previous job you have some money out there in a 401k. You can take that money off of Wall Street, create your own retirement corporation, and move it into Main Street. And that was one of the things I got taught about. I looked into it, and that's what we did. It's not the most efficient way to access capital, but that got me 6 figures of equity right off the bat, right? And so, and I think it cost me like $4,500 to access about $100,000 in equity, maybe a little bit more than that. So, you know, it's like taking money out of the ATM machine. You know, there's transaction fees for doing certain things, and that's the cost of making money. So, but that rollover for business startup allowed me to create a retirement corporation that is now one of the shareholders in the Epicure Brewing business. And it has, you know, Epicure owes it money, but it's very patient money. It doesn't care when it gets paid back because it's my retirement funds from previous employer. And it's not all of them. So it's not like I'm stressed about what's going to happen to me if I lose it, but I was able to invest in myself instead of investing in Merrill Lynch or somebody else that I don't know what they're doing with my money. Yeah, this is, you know, these are, you know, when you look up business plans on the internet, you can find all kinds of templates. You know, there's all kinds of things that you need to have in there. You know, I think the marketing competitive analysis are very important. I gave you a quick example of how to do those. Google Maps. Google Maps is the easiest way to do a competitive analysis, like who's out there in your neighborhood. The market analysis is once you draw that brewery shed that I mentioned, like find out where people are and how far they are, and then you can draw a circle, and that circle, most likely there's census data that's out there. So you can find out that you can do that demographic study. There's also companies out there that do it and you can pay for it. The financial plan, it becomes one of the more challenging things to do in a project. You know, banks are going to want to see a cash flow for probably 3 to 5 years and a P&L for a similar period of time. And then, you know, they're going to want to see a break-even analysis. So, you know, looking into all those things or in developing those tools. We have a tool here I use, pro forma tool that I use mostly for when people are proposing new construction or to remodel buildings. And it's a tool that I've been shaping and sharpening for the last 5 or 6 years so that it would be more useful. And that has the ability to look at capital improvements to a property and look at that over time, and it builds out a cash flow. If you fill in the cash flow statement on an annual for 1 year, it'll automatically fill that in for 10 years with 2% or 2.5% escalation built in, and then it'll automatically fill in a 10-year P&L. So it's way more than what a bank's going to be looking for, and all you have to do is figure out how to fill in the first years of cost estimates and revenues, right? So yeah, industry overview, like you got to know what your industry is and like what are your peers doing, and are you networked with them? Part of my business plan actually had a section about mentors. So people I've talked to that have said, hey, Jay, if you ever have a question, give me a call, right? Guess what that person just said to you? I want to be your mentor. I want to help you, right? And so one of the best things you can do is compliment them by saying you're one of my mentors, right? Like, I really appreciate that you are willing to coach me, and you know, you're willing to be part of my team for free, right? So that network is critical because that network may be connected in ways that you don't know. They may be on a bank board. They may, you know, run some other thing that you just never thought about what their world is and who they know and how they may help you. So we complimented those people by calling them mentors and letting them know that we were doing it. And then we continually get counseling from them because you don't know what you don't know. Even when you are running your business, you don't know what you don't know. You're constantly running up against things like, oh, dang it, I wish I knew that. Yeah, so people always tell me, so one of the things, like, people tell me, oh, where do you start? Like, do you start with the executive summary? And I tell people no, and here's why. A summary is exactly that. It's something, you had something else that you're summarizing. So, like, how do you start with the summary? No, you got to start writing the plan and then figure out, all right, what can I take out? And, like, you know, what can I put into 4 pages that somebody's actually going to read, or 6 pages? The business plan that I have is 100 pages long. Like, not everybody's going to want to read that. And I don't want to give that to everybody because it has layers of detailed information in it, like the P&L and the spreadsheets. You know, my spreadsheet part of my business plan is it has 40 tabs in it, you know, and those 40 tabs do all kinds of I tried to estimate manufacturing over time so I could get a feel for, you know, what it would cost to manufacture the product, and then figure out what it would cost to sell it, because ultimately a brewery is a manufacturer, not just a retailer. So there was a lot of data that went into trying to understand, how all this came together. And the business plan is storytelling. Like I'm telling you stories right now. What I would do in my business plan is I'd have sidebars. The way I organize my writing is that the white paper, instead of using the full margins that come automatic, I use shoulders on the paper. Maybe before we get off the call, I'll show you an example of that, where in the sidebar, I can tell a separate story. Like for the brewery scene, the tap room, we were trying to create a concept called the third place. And that may be new to some people, but what third places are is you have where you work, you have where you live, and then you have where you want to hang out. And where you want to hang out is a third place. It could be a library, it could be a restaurant. We were trying to make our tap room a destination tap room, meaning that people would want to hang out there. And what were we going to do to make that a hangoutable place, if you will? There were no TVs. There's no live music. There's no dartboards or pool tables. Those are all what other places have. And we didn't want to be that kind of hangout place, because you can go to other places and do that. We wanted to be a place where people just came and talked. We wanted to be an Irish pub kind of atmosphere, where this is a place where you went, met your friends, and you laughed and talked to each other, and there were no other distractions. It was about your friends. And so that was part of our story that we wanted to be able to tell. How do you solve your customers' pains? So one of my mentors, Bob Mills, always told me, people don't know they're sick. You got to tell them that they're sick. Is kind of what you're doing in marketing, and that you have the cure, right? So, what is it that you're going to be able to do that makes it compelling for them to come to your business, to be there, and making people aware that they're sick, if you will. Doesn't mean that they're actually sick. Just that they need you. That you're a part of the solution. So this is your data. So the wisdom pyramid, if you could picture this pyramid, right, starts with data. Data means nothing. It's data, but you got to have data. From data, you can glean information. And information's kind of important. Like, these 3 pieces of data mean something. From information comes knowledge, and knowledge enables you to start thinking about how that information is impactful and meaningful. And then the highest part of the pyramid is wisdom, that you actually glean wisdom. But you can't have wisdom if you don't have data. It's layers of this, that the data becomes information, that the information becomes knowledge, and the knowledge becomes wisdom. And always cite your data. Collect it, cite it, put it in the spreadsheet, put it wherever you need. So these slides, Mary will make them available to folks afterwards if you want to go through them. But these are straightforward about, what is it that you're going to do, your vision for it. I find that customers like what your vision is and what your mission is. It's very important to be able to share that with them. That might be the 30-second elevator speech. Like, what is it that you want your customers to know very quickly about what you're doing? And then there's a whole series of different feasibility analysis questions that are a critical part of this business plan. Right now, one of the issues that businesses are running into is supply chain. So we had a bike shop in downtown Norwich that recently had to close because guess what? They couldn't sell bikes or get bike parts to fix bikes. So they were renting a space and had to pay rent every month, but had no way to make income. After a period of time, that's it. You can't sustain that. So what he had learned from his supply chain was that new bikes weren't going to be available to him until March. Now, it doesn't mean new bikes are not available, but the supply chain is going to sell to bigger vendors, bigger customers first, and a very small customer like that shop doesn't have the buying power to try to take advantage of it. So, understanding some of those weaknesses in what you're doing. And these are just some, this is how a lot of these business plans get developed, from sort of this outward side in thinking. And I think these are slides that just kind of, as you think about your business, just think about the outside going in versus the inside going out. And this is what is the mission? What's the values? What's the purpose? This is really the foundation of what your business is. And that's what customers are going to react the most to. They're not going to react. If you're going to just open a business and you're going to offer something at the lowest price, you're going to be out of business. And that you see that happen in a Walmart right now. The dollar stores are popping up everywhere. People are like, I can't believe these dollar stores are popping up everywhere. That's my invitation of people. And the reason that they're doing it is because they're price beating Walmart. And they know that people can get in and out quicker than they get in and out of the Walmart superstore, and they can beat them on price. So they're popping up to try to beat Walmart. Well, guess what? They'll be the next version of them. They're just where they're at in the process, because Walmart took out all the other price-based businesses like Ames and Zayres and Caldors. And so at some point, the dollar stores will be taken out by somebody else that's going to beat them on price. If that's what your value proposition is, you don't control it. Unless you're a manufacturer, you don't control price ultimately. Target customers, talking to people. There's a lot of work you can do before you're a business to see if there's a need. On the brewery side, we went to a whole bunch of beer competitions and festivals prior to opening to share our beer with people for free. We gave it away, and that, doing that test marketing was a very helpful thing because we got some good feedback about what we're doing. Yeah, so I'm not sure. Nobody's talking about doing manufacturing, but that's what we prototyped the product before we opened. Is one of the things that we did in the brewing world to make sure that we actually had, something. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to, develop your business plan. So the FDIC is recommending this grid process that you can look up that works off the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, kind of concepts. And those are good tools. Like if you don't know where to start, a toolkit like that can help you start building in the answers, right? And finding the answers becomes the solving for X. It's all algebra, right? We just got to solve the variable here. And then these are things that it's hitting home on. There are a whole bunch of things that you're going to need. That what equipment do you need? How much furniture do you need? All these things go in. Like, have you talked to furniture vendors? And is it commercial grade? Like, how long is it going to last? And what's the inventory supply? What vendors are you going to be dealing with? And are those vendors, what are their terms? Do they work on credit, or do they have a 30-day payment? How do they operate? So these are all things that it's easier to figure out when you have time to do it than when you're like, holy smokes, we got a great opening tomorrow and I don't have everything that I need. And there will be, we have a grand opening tomorrow and I don't have that thing that I need that you can't get for a week. When we had our grand opening for the brewery, our chiller, which keeps all of our beer cold and our cold room cold, broke. And the part for it was in the South Carolina. And so for 3 days, we were panicked that we weren't going to be able to keep our beer at temperature. And thankfully, everything in our brewery has temperature controls on it, so we know what the temperatures were. But we were panicked because guess what? Like, that part was a long ways away, and it was hard to get it here. And there were a whole bunch of other parts of the story, but to have $150,000 worth of beer that you could lose on the day that you open was not something that we were overly excited about or prepared for. And things like that go wrong. So what we learned that day is we need to have somebody that can fix our chiller on standby. And guess what we have now? A very good relationship with the guy that can fix our chiller, right? So that day we were panicked trying to find somebody that could do that work. It was a brand new chiller. Like, you wouldn't think it would go down 3 weeks or a month into operating, but it sure did. Maximum value for least possible total cost. And there's cost is one of the things. There's time, and then there's quality. Those are the 3 things that people are buying. Okay, that's their 3 choices, and you only get 2 out of the 3. If you want it quick and cheap, it's not going to be a great quality. If you want great quality and cheap, it's going to take a lot of time, right? And then you could do the math and figure out the 3rd one. But they only get 2 out of the 3 things, and most people don't recognize that. And that's part of your value proposition is this is what we do. And least possible total cost doesn't mean cheap. listen about cheap and inexpensive. Never tell your customers something's expensive or cheap. Never tell them. Don't let them make the value judgment about whether what you're doing is worth it. I learned that from a friend of mine who owns a jewelry store, and what he told me was, we never let the customer know something's expensive or cheap. We let them decide how it works up for them. You know, they make their own decision whether they value it. And if you tell somebody it's expensive, you could push them off a sale they might otherwise have made. So why would you do that? Market analysis, we talked a little bit about, you know, where customers might be, you know, who your customer is. Is it that person? Is it another business? You know, how do you get your products on the store shelves might be part of it, because those stores are customers. You know, they don't have to put your product on a shelf, and they may not want to for a bunch of reasons. So understanding who's a buyer, who's going to buy your product. That character piece, the management team, like who's going to, who knows what they're doing, why should we trust the team? Like, why are they capable? Who are they? Marketing plan. So this is something Mary is an expert at. I'm not going to dive too deep in it. I'm sure you have more programming on marketing, but you know, what are you going to do for marketing? Are you going to word of mouth or social media, you know, website, or pieces of it? But then, you know, what about your brand development? Or what are your communication goals, your target audience? What methods are you using, and who's responsible for it? You know, so your customers may not know that you're out there, and especially if you're just going to rely on word of mouth, you may not have customers for a while, because word of mouth is not the quickest means of marketing. The financial plan, yeah, this, you know, budget's a plan. A budget is a plan of what we plan on doing with the money that we anticipate having. And, you know, running Foundry and NCDC, I look at that budget daily, and I look at the plan. And we spent hours putting the plan together and talked about like what we want to do with the plan. Like, why are we putting money in this line item? Well, we want to do X, Y, and Z with that money. Okay, great. So then now I look at it every day, and I look at, okay, should we do X, Y, and Z today, or should we wait to January? Like, there's a lot of strategy that comes out of that. Like, what are the tactics that we're going to do? There's a strategic part of it. And I just like the word strategy, even though it's not a word. So the assumptions that you're making, it's important for banks and others to understand what assumptions you're making, so that they can say, okay, that, you know, and here's another part of why a bank is great to work with, because they probably have loaned money to somebody else in your sector. So in the case of the bank that the brewery's working, they had lended money to another brewery. So they knew what was going on in that brewery. And so they can see what we're doing compared to that brewery, and we get coaching as a result of that, right? There's a relationship there, because they're the salespeople that are the lenders. They want to continue making sales from us, right? We're a customer for them. And if we're successful, then they'll be successful, and they'll get a commission or a bonus based on how successful we are. So the more that they know, the more helpful it is. And I can tell you that the bank that the brewery works with, 3 of their commercial lenders hang out in our space. And so, well, pre-COVID, I would talk to these people every other week about what was going on with the business, and you know, get valuable coaching from them. And I tell you, you know, for the price of a beer, that was a pretty good deal.
And Jason, I do have to say, if people are looking for a loan from a bank, you know, you should be interviewing your lender. You should be asking them questions. You should say, do you have any other clients or customers like me? And not because you want to land a bank that you're going to be their sole customer like that, but because you want to land a bank that understands your business.
Yeah, that's a great point. If they understand your business, they're going to be more capable of helping you no matter what you do. And they're part of your team. Like, so interviewing banks and understanding that the bank they're salespeople. So if they're not convinced that your idea is a good idea, they're not going to buy it, because even though they're salespeople, they're not going to waste their time and energy on an idea that they can't sell to their loan committee. They ultimately have to pitch your idea to a committee. Just things that if you know how the system works, it's easier to understand it. Yeah, so the cash flow and the P&Ls are forecasts of where you think you're going to be. And I told you several times, cash is king. You can't run a business without it. So, you're trying to forecast that you're going to have cash at the end of the year. What I found is most businesses that don't last a year didn't have a business plan and definitely didn't have a bookkeeper. So part of the operations and management, you should be looking for a bookkeeper. They are very hard to find. There's not a lot of them. They tend to have a lot of customers. The good ones tend to be already overbooked. But what's nice about bookkeepers is they are working in a lot of successful businesses typically. And so they're bringing the knowledge they're learning from those businesses to yours. And so you're paying them a little bit for some of the observations they're making when they're working with other businesses. They're discreet. They're not going to tell you what other businesses are doing. But when they're working with other businesses that are very finance detail focused, if you will, they're really got good professionals that understand financial documents. That bookkeeper is learning some acumen that they can then help you learn. Okay. This is, if you don't know how to start, again, a notebook's a great place. You also have on your phone text to type. You have a notepad in your phone, and you could just talk into it. You don't have to know how to write or be good at writing. You could just, and the collection of your voice memos in text to type can then be brought over and put into the framework of the business plan. You outline you download the outline, and then you just plug it into your phone, and every time you have something, you copy and paste it into the plan. That's a very quick and easy way without having to sit at a keyboard. And so these are some things that you by sharing your business plan with others, they'll help you figure out where you're making these mistakes, like especially generated growth or performance. There's every industry has benchmarks. People can tell you that, oh yeah, that industry does 4% a year. That's what it does. So if you're saying we're going to do 12% a year, well, wait, I'm out. That's not the industry benchmark. Why are you so far off? And that won't get you anywhere. So these are some of the other things that I was mentioning: the small business development centers, service corps, retired executive score. I mentioned the trade associations. If you have a trade association that you can belong to, become a member. If there's a certification you can get from being a member, get that certification. If there's a leadership role that you can play within that organization, do that. Those are all good things because you'll build a great network. One of my shareholder partners is on the Connecticut Brewers Guild. She's the treasurer. And so she goes to monthly meetings, and now we're better connected with breweries across the state of Connecticut than we ever were. So we are knowing what other breweries are doing, and we're collaborating with them more, which is a good thing. I think a lot of these details I kind of hit upon here. So so this was kind of the end of their document that I tried to use to tell you the story about business planning. What we've had to do since COVID is our plan was to sell product to restaurants and bars, and then to run a tap room, and that customers would come to us. Well, COVID shut all that down, so then our plan had to change. And what we had to do is convert product that we were putting in kegs into cans. And so, that involved, we don't have canning equipment. So that involved bringing in canning equipment, spending money to convert that into a product that we could then sell to consumers. We never sold product on the internet. So that involved updating our website so that we created a internet-based sales platform so that people could buy our product on the internet. And then most recently, we had to have food to open, and so we went out and bought a food cart, and licensed it, and got all of our personal licensing, so that we could run it, certifications and whatnot, so we could run a food cart. Those weren't part of our plan, but that's what we had to do to react and adapt to what the conditions were that we're faced with. And I can tell you that with 6 people, we're like a big ship. So turning what we're doing is very hard. So these weren't things that we were quick to do. When there's a lot of people in the decision-making process, getting everybody to agree can be hard. But those are things that our business plan had to be redefined, and we've had to go back and adjust some performance numbers to say, okay, if we invest this money in this, what's our rate of return, and is this a good thing to do? And so those are things we've had to do. So that's my story, and that's what I'm sticking with. So I'll take any questions you might have. Want to mention that here.
There's a one question in chat there.
Yeah, so let me, we appreciate that. We just started getting the land ready to start growing, self-funded, down in Pawcatuck, which is a great neighborhood. And what's great about, you're looking to grow food and you're down in a neighborhood where there's a lot of wealth. So just seeing what's happened with Stone Acres Farm, if you've been over there, and Jane Meisner is an awesome person to talk to if you haven't connected with her. You know, they're doing some amazing things, and you know, they took her family as 9th century. She's a 9th century landholder, I guess. They took her family farm and they made it an event center and a farm, because really people want to connect with the farmer. So over at Epicure, we actually have we're a CSA pickup point. So one of the things to think about is using CSA, community supported agriculture, to try to get your customers engaged and have them part of the risk for planting and growing. And I right now I don't belong to a CSA just because I'm not consuming as much vegetables as those things provide. But I have historically, because I see the value in supporting people that are growing food and knowing where my food comes from. So that's great that you're doing that. I was going to try to bring up one of my sidebars. Here's what might make sense. Maybe I just bring up the Epicure business. So yeah, so this is a 2015 version 20 of the business plan. Because every time I went back and edited it, I just the made big edits, I would just renumber it. And so you know, this we over time we changed our logo a little bit, but we just talk about what our vision is. World-class craft beer is delivered in a fun and inviting atmosphere where customers can hang out, relax, and connect with the product, the brand, and the family. And that's what our vision was. And our philosophy was simple. We work hard, we enjoy great craft beer, and we create a fun atmosphere. It's kind of how we thought we'd be able to do it. This is an overview, is the summary. I didn't call it executive summary, but this is the summary. And then like why we thought our neighborhood was, you know, we thought the location was a critical part to talk about, because most people think, why are you going to downtown Norwich? So we knew that would be something we had to convince people about. So that's why we talked about First Fridays, which is events that are held here. So we knew people were coming into the neighborhood for events that we didn't have to host. Like Maria's involved in Norwich events. They host parades. So they're doing all the work to bring all the customers into the neighborhood. And on St. Patrick's Day, we have a great day because of the work that they do. So like, how can we build off that synergy, right? So that was telling that story about what the competitive advantage was of this neighborhood. The project elements, like we talked about a destination brewery, but what did that mean? You know, that there was the brew house and the tap room, and there were a bunch of pieces that then went under that concept. This third place that I mentioned, these are the sidebars. You can see them on the, you know, the way the page is set up. So third place, live, work, and play. And what is it? And bring your own food. That's another thing. People don't understand. What's bring your own food? Well, we have 10 restaurants in the neighborhood. You can go get food from anywhere and bring them to our place and eat. And the other night I had 2 couples that came in. One couple got Mexican, the other one got Korean, and they met there and ate together. So instead of having to pick what restaurant you want to go to, everybody picks their own and brings their own. Beer sales volumes, craft versus domestic and imported in 2013. Why we thought brewery as a destination was a competitive advantage compared to what other people were doing. Our management team, people that are leading our effort, and why they're important, and you know, kind of what they were doing in their work. How that is as a competitive advantage was kind of what we always talked about, and you'll see that as a theme throughout the whole thing. How ownership's broken up, all things that people want to know you know, what you're doing and how you're doing it, job descriptions, advisors. Here's that advisor team that I mentioned. And see what I did with the bank is I highlighted your bank name here, right? I had a nephew, he has a business card and on it, it says your future employee. And the first job he went to, he got. So was kind of up there. So that's just, you know, just a little bit of what's going on here. So what I did is I found trade information, and these are graphics that I found on the internet, and I put the trade information in, right? Demand indicators. Here I talk about community supported agriculture as a demand indicator, seeing, you know, that that industry is growing. So that means people are orienting towards knowing where their food is sourced, right? Beer sold in Connecticut, 1.9 million barrels of beer is sold versus 51,000. That's a massive gap of beer that's not made in Connecticut. This is back when we were doing the plan, right? So these are things that I used, and you know, what kinds of beers might we make? What might that gap look like in terms of numbers? Where our competition is, and like how big they are and how much beer we think they're making, because not everybody will tell you that. But we based it on what we thought they could make, and then all the different breweries. So I guess there were 38 at the time that we were doing this. And here's that beer shed I was telling you about. So this graphic right here that I'm spinning around, that is a midpoint of every other brewery that was open at the time. So if you were going to go to Black Pond or us, Plainfield, where basically where Route 14 is, and Plainfield would be the midpoint. So and then that you can see there's a significantly underserved area is kind of what we wanted to tell people. Regional craft beers, we just wanted to show like how big some of these places were compared to what we were looking to do. The marketing plan, how much we were planning on spending on the various things, what the metrics were, like how were you going to measure it. So so those are, I just figured I'd share a couple of those things that got us to show you the sidebars and whatnot, and you know, a little bit of the details of like what I told you about. So, all right.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Jason, for being here today and talking to us about business plans. I can send everybody who is on the call today a copy of the PowerPoint presentation if everybody wants it. And if you haven't signed up for any of the other classes in the small business series, you definitely should, because we'll be following up with marketing, and tomorrow evening is one on taxes and things like that. So, you know, if you're interested in those, please let me know. If you just signed up outside of the series, let me know and I'll get you the link so you can register for the other classes. So thanks everybody for coming out today and taking some time out of your afternoon. Thanks, Jason, so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. Good luck, guys.
All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great afternoon.